Hi Biren, how are you doing?
Hi Chand.
So the National Animation Gaming Conclave 2010, how's the 2 days been? The chair of NACFO, what would be your closing comments?
I think the wonderful thing about NACFO is its diversity, and a bit like the country, it has so many different moving parts that it's difficult to summarize with one statement what each of these constituencies have achieved and what the opportunity is going forward. But the natural tug on NACFO comes from 5 sectors. The new tugs that are, I think, really strong goes back to the basics of what we did in NASCOM earlier. There's a technology tug. And I think you'll see that there is a whole track and a whole sidebar to the whole conference, or the momentum for the NACFO committee itself, that will be technology-led.
Right.
On the other end of the spectrum, obviously, is the creative side and the talent side, which is so critical. One of the things about this conference that people said, hey, where's the education piece? And I think that's something that we've been doing with the BAGS initiative and other initiatives. It's also acknowledged quite clearly that that space is definitely a sweet spot for NASCOM to take forward. And it's happening at the state level, but it wasn't showcased in the conference. So, you know, from the technology and the talent side, I think there is more to do when we come out next year. A little bit of re-engineering, I think, is required from the point of view of where the natural demand is coming from.
Right.
The gaming guys, I think, are very well networked amongst themselves, and what they've done is they've taken the direction of thought leadership to actually focus on developers.
Right.
In the past, they were under the general umbrella of animation and visual effects, and in that general umbrella, it was always about the business guys connecting.
Right.
So that's moving very nicely as a developer-oriented, developer-focused. The customer really for that part of the conference is developers.
Right.
And we see that that's probably going to move to satellite events that will roll up into 1 or even 2 such events in the year. So that's the gaming story as we see it emerge.
Right.
The visual effects story feels highly under-leveraged. There is actually no visible visual effects bodies that do as much as many other constituencies do in animation for talent and gaming across the country. So there's a big push to make sure that the VFX day, if you like, becomes as prominent as the gaming day or days have become in this conference. And I think next year you'll see that is a very significant portion of what we're doing.
We had an interesting session of Biren Ghose, Mr. Kamalakan from Akuta VFX, who is doing wonderful in the hardware industry. Represent stuff over here, along with a big presence of MPC over here as well. So, do you think this is what is going to grow up in the next year with the VFX track also growing more importance in here as well?
It's a very interesting question. There are 2 or 3 different ways in which we are seeing companies, leading sectors take things forward.
Right.
On the gaming side, there are, I would say now, small to medium-sized companies that are doing the big things for the country.
Right.
In the case of animation, as I was saying yesterday in the opening address, we've actually, you can almost see a super tier emerging in that whole story.
Right.
On the visual effects side, I think it's an even more interesting story, where the international giants are developing an India leg, and the local companies like the Prime Focuses and Pixions are actually going and acquiring companies outside there.
It's like a 2-year-old now.
It's a 2-year-old story, and it's growing. I think just this week there was another Prime Focus announcement in the last few days on another acquisition in the UK. So, you know, there's lots of stuff that's happening on the visual effects space, and also because of the fact that of these 3 industries, the visual effects industry has a more natural tug from local domestic market, both at the national Hindi movie level, but also across the country.
Right.
I mean, the Tamil and Telugu and spaces, for example, are not insignificant in terms of size and opportunity.
Right.
So I think there's more to happen.
Right.
Now, the direction for the future, as we said on the game side, is quite clear that it's developer focused. On the visual effects and the animation side, I think one of the things that we need to do is to clearly separate tracks that are more executive oriented and more creative or technical oriented. So that's been the missing piece, and that's, I think, something to think about for the future.
Right.
I also see the model becoming far more collaborative.
Okay.
The model is where we reach, the conference is just a lighthouse, but it can actually provide, if you like, a thought leadership to many other events that are done by people like yourself and many other constituencies, talent bodies, the ASIFAs, the TASIs for the talent side,
Yes.
Events that take place on the technology side, like the CG Expo and Broadcast India, and there are many other conferences of that type. And not insignificant in this whole mix is really the ability for people to be at this conference sitting in their offices or at home.
Yes.
And I think what we are doing with this video and the stuff from this conference is basically creating that content in bite size,
Yes.
so that people can savor it afterwards.
Right.
I have always been to conferences in other parts of the world and also here in India to actually meet people that I don't meet for half a year or a year. And at the same time, my head wants to be in the conference, my heart wants to meet old friends, and my head and heart want to connect with people for business. So the after party, I've always said, is a very key part of any conference. It does cause some collateral damage to visitors in the morning, but I think I've always judged events from, hey, how goes the party in the evening? And I've said this many times before to colleagues. Most of the people that I've done business with in these 10 years in animation are people I met at some after party or the other. And I did less business with the one that I had a 15-minute meeting with, and we could not communicate our needs so clearly to each other.
Right.
So I think that's really something that I think we should do more of, which is to make sure that there are abilities to encapsulate the thoughts that were created here, and continue to discuss that through now the wonderful power of the blogs and the power of video and social networking and so on and so forth. So I think this conference, which is a one-day conference, can potentially be a 365-day conference.
Right.
With taking the thoughts that people prepare because they want to come here and be significant in what they say and relevant in what they say, and then that sparks conversation and that sparks debate. Just looking back on the last 2 days, the whole, if you like, mini controversy on what should IP from India be is so interesting, because you're looking at 2 or 3 different flavors there.
Right.
Of course, people did the natural thing which they did in live action in movies, which is to start with the Mytho track.
Right.
And then that's found its own altitude, it's found its own position. But now, when we heard the broadcasters yesterday, they say, because we can't afford to pay for the whole cake and we can only buy it by the slice, so it should be not Mytho, because maybe other countries can also participate in that content.
Right.
So now that creates a whole different question about what should that be.
It also opens a door, I guess, for more countries.
Absolutely. So you can go, many routes now. You can go the what is available in public domain route, which we've seen now, and we saw yesterday the first look for Peter Pan,
right.
and we've already seen the success of what it takes to make a new Jungle Book as one track.
Right.
And then you see the other track, which is what we announced here as a very exclusive announcement for India, which was to show how we can create a Hollywood product like Siju Thomas showcased the Pete and Pickles trailer, where Siju and a considerable team of creators have got this unique opportunity that something will be originally developed from the very first thought, both technologically as well as artistically, in the vision of the author or the creator from Hollywood, and for that to be done ground up in India is a very significant step. The other tracks were obviously people who are looking for what I was now calling the buzzword of the conference. I introduced that word called co-creation. And the purpose of introducing co-creation, be it games or visual effects or animation, is that we are beginning to do things ahead of most parts of Asia, which is to participate in the front end. Mm-hmm. Because we've always been judged on, hey, how good a back-end player are we? Are we number 1 in the world, number 3, number 10, nowhere? I mean, that's the kind of question we've been asking ourselves for a long time. But suddenly here's this whole new avenue, which is a delight for technicians, which is a delight for artists, and a delight obviously for people who are executives making the deals. Because if we are seriously in a position to begin to participate in the front end, then the value capture for the country, both in terms of the work that can happen, but also in terms of the learning and the know-how that one will develop, will actually help a lot when we even move to the next phase of developing local or domestic products or Asian products.
Right.
Because if you really get the end-to-end, front-end, back-end know-how, then you know where to trim the sails to make something appropriate.
Right. Right.
So I think that's been a very, very big change in the discussions between the last 2 days and the last 10 years.